position.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My camera's not there. It's there. Welcome to the Saturday morning RPG show. My name is Jordan with a silent PH in the middle. And I'm joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, sir.
Hello, everybody. I don't know. On my screen, you had paused in your camera pose, but that's okay. You're back to normal now.
Oh,
So.
I don't know. Hiccups, dropped frames probably. Who knows? I can't read or
Changed
write.
angles or something there.
Yeah,
sir.
well, so I had my camera here, but then so many people were just like, are you cutting up bodies there? What's with all that plastic? Because we're remodeling the house. So I moved it here to record my video on the Easter eggs in the D&D movie. I don't know if you saw that, Lucian, but I made a video.
I did. I watched every bit of it.
And I thought that was fun. There were a couple more, and I was like, I'll just do these ones. But I also have recorded my updated obelisk video, and that will be edited this weekend for next week. And I've got a couple other videos. I'm just trying to find time to do it. And also, you know, it's hard when my house is in disarray. Me and Seth Skorkowski actually are going through the same thing, because he was complaining about his house is under a remodel right now too. And I messaged him and I was like, dude, I think I understand. He's like, yep, we're going through all of that. He's like, do you have that like quantum fine dust on everything? And I'm like, yep. Every morning I wake up and I'm like, what? And you just find it everywhere. So,
chalky white-ish dust of drywall.
It's
sanding.
Awful. So awful. Welcome everybody. We're a D&D, we're an RPG talk show. We talk about D&D stuff and a bunch of other things. And we have we usually start off with the news. And the big news, well, there's lots of news, but we're going to talk about Lord of the Rings for 5e. It arrives May 9th from Free League. I am trying to remember who had the license before this. Who made the other Lord of the Rings game that got like pulled off the shelves? You can't buy it anymore.
Matt Colville worked on one.
I think it was called like the One Ring. Was it the One Ring?
Yeah.
One Ring RPG.
There
I don't know.
A few different companies holding the Lord of the Rings license for the tabletop art.
Yeah, Free League has the One Ring. There was literally like Lord of the Rings 5e. I probably have the PDF actually. I should look it up. I should have looked it up before I started. Wah wah. But that version of the Lord of the Rings was pretty good. Like I really liked that book. And it was just kind of interesting because they can't sell it anymore for whatever licensing something that happened. And I remember WebDM even, they commented like, if you can find a copy of that PDF, keep it, because it was like not telling you to pirate, but there's literally no other way to get it. But this is the One Ring. It's very anticipated. A lot of people are excited about it, and it arrives next month. So pretty exciting.
I mean, it's really the other. I mean, is it the biggest fantasy world? Is it bigger than the Dungeons and Dragons fantasy world, just in pop cultural sense and in?
It defined so much of D&D, you know, like elves in D&D, I think are Tolkien elves, because before that elves were like little shoemakers that came in the night, you know, or they were like mischievous, whatever. Like Tolkien defined so much of D&D that I would say that it is bigger.
It's the quintessential fantasy world. Everything, there are nice big fantasy worlds like it, or as big as it, or as expansive. I mean, even just in the sheer of, you could deep dive into the history and the lore and the canon of it. That's the biggest one. So to have a tabletop role-playing game based on that makes total sense to me. Like,
and I would even say currently I think it's the biggest one, simply because those movies were so popular and kind of defined a generation of myself. Like they came out right when I was in like a freshman in college, and like it's all we talked about was the Lord of the Rings movies and reading the books and stuff. So yeah, I think it really, it probably is. I don't know. I mean, that's probably a hot take to say it's the biggest, but they hired Elijah Wood to do like a little intro for the video. So he's like, hey, there's an RPG. And some of my friends were wondering, like, I wonder how much that cost. And I'm like, well, it probably costs some money for him to like endorse the thing. But I don't think, but he's not playing a game of this with other cast members. So
He is. I saw a
Oh, is
YouTube
he?
video where he is playing. I don't think there's other cast members, but he is in the game to play a Lord of the Rings role playing game. I'm gonna have to go back and find that now. And it said in Elijah Wood's in it. I'm thinking, oh, that makes total sense. I mean,
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, if you want a face for this, like that's a good one to have. And he's such a nice guy. But I was, we were talking. I'm like, getting him to play a game is probably going to be more expensive than him doing a 10-minute like, yeah, it's really cool. Check it out. So,
and Sean Austin,
yes,
the other Samwise,
the other Hobbit, yeah,
he's done a Kickstarter, which I have backed, and I'm still waiting for my hardcover copy of a TTRPG.
Really?
He's a big role-playing fan. He's a huge gaming role-playing fan. Yeah. So Samwise, you could definitely get to play your game if you invited him, I'm sure.
Elijah is a mega nerd, they say. Yeah, that's cool. I always felt that Lord of the Rings didn't translate to. I guess it's because I like magic, and I like feeling like a superhero. And playing in the Lord of the Rings, those are very like magic is very unknown, which can be fun. But and then I think we've talked about this where like the ring is destroyed, like it's done. What story are you telling after that? What story? If you tell a story before that, it's always kind of like, well, am I going to help this because I already know that they succeeded? Open-ended things are kind of more our style, I feel. But would you play a Lord of the Rings game?
Yeah. That's the tough part because you can't get the story of the Lord of the Rings out of your head when you're playing it because it's so iconic. It's so ingrained that how do you try to say, well, this is 100 years in the future, guys. So, that's all been done. No big deal. Nothing will ever come up of the ring, but we're going to play in this world and we have this adventure set for you. I'm just like, how do you get I'm always thinking back, well, what's happened to the hobbits? I want to go find out what's happened to, have all the trees grown back from where's Treebeard at this point? I'm like, I can't stop thinking about that storyline and the characters in that storyline to think about me creating my own storyline in that world. So it's tough. It's like, do you want to play in the Critical Role world? Do you want to play in the Lord of the Rings world? Do you want to play in, I guess Harry Potter's world? But I guess
I think Harry Potter's a good example, but I was going to say Star Trek because it's so episodic. I feel like we could play a Star Trek or even a Star Wars, and I could make high stakes for my players that are not related to the Empire or not this. But for some reason, Lord of the Rings, it's like you really did defeat the evilest of evils, like the thing that was destroying Middle-earth, and now it's gone forever, and the elves are sailing away. Like, there will be challenges, but it will never live up to that feeling of like, oh my gosh. Whereas I feel like I could tell a Star Trek story that does live up to that feeling of like, the Borg are attacking, because the Borg are still out there. They could still attack.
We haven't had a lot of spin-off from Lord of the Rings, right? We haven't had other stories during other times or other characters of Lord of the Rings. It's just the Hobbit.
Well,
and the Ring,
yeah. There are the Rings of Power Amazon show. I don't know if you watched that, but I agree. Like everything that we're doing is like precursor stuff, because I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. Like, would you? I guess that goes to my question. Would you play, or
what are the classes? I mean, what are we?
Know.
I mean, sure. I think if there was a
5e.
DM that was passionate enough, and they're just like, Lucian, I love this world so much, and I want to run a game, and here's my idea for the storyline, and here's what's happening, and they really sold me on what's happening, and then you're going to have a character that's in it. I'm sure I would play, but I don't know if I would ever try to organize a game of Lord of the Rings 5e and then either DM it or try to find a DM. Like, I wouldn't be the catalyst for it, but I would do it if somebody offered. I guess would be kind of the.
If someone was excited enough about it, I would join, but I'm not seeking it. It's kind of like I would run a Star Trek game in a heartbeat. I don't mind Star Wars, but I would never run a Star Wars game. I just don't have that passion for it. Like other people do.
Fan, so.
But if somebody said, I want to run you a Star Wars game, I'd say, okay, I'll play in it. Like, that sounds fun. So, but that's just kind of preference of fandoms and things like that. So I don't know.
Jordan, do you want to be a Mandalorian and save Grogu?
No, Actually, the one Star Wars game that I got invited to, I'm like, can I be R2D2? I want to be an astromech droid. And they're like, yeah, you can totally do that. It's in the rules. And I was like, yes. Like, everyone's like, I want to be a Jedi. I want to do this. And I'm like, no, thank you. I want to be a robot.
And then they have an Ewok. It'd be a droid and an Ewok. And then here's the adventure.
I mean, that writes itself. Like, that's amazing. Yes. So why are we not playing that right now? Exactly. This is kind of tangentially related to tabletop role-playing games, but I think Netflix is ordering a Stranger Things animated series. And I'm really curious what this is going to be about, but I think they're acknowledging, like, the kids don't look like kids anymore, and Stranger Things is really popular. What are we going to do?
It works for so long, right? For your cast, without doing some crazy, spending lots of money to maybe de-age or, use some of that technology. But realistically, you could run a show for 10 years. Your teenagers are going to grow out of it no matter who you've cast at that point.
Yeah. I mean, that 70s show, like, it happened with all of anytime you're casting kids. I haven't seen the new Shazam, but I was thinking about that too. I'm like, Billy Batson's getting bigger. Like, you can't always use him. You have a very small window to utilize that actor. So this seems like a logical step. I don't know. We don't know anything about it. What it'll be, but I think that Stranger Things will transition well into an animated show, and especially like a creepy horror kind of, I mean, it could work really well. So we'll see.
Here's the positives I see. Netflix also did the Castlevania animated series, which is freaking fantastic.
It is really good. Yeah.
They have put in action sequence scenes that are so Dungeons and Dragons. It's unbelievable. That, yes, what we might get in this, though, which would be my hope, I would cross my fingers, is we might get more animated action of the kids playing their characters, which we don't get in the movies or the show, because it's more about them just kind of talking it out around the table. And then we go into what's happening in the real world. But we could get more of what are their characters doing, and that could be animated out into the action sequence of them fighting the Demogorgon and losing. And, that whole first scene in that first episode, they're talking about that. We could see it, we could see those things. So we could get more Dungeons and Dragons creatures. We could get more characters fighting in Dungeons and Dragons settings. Plus we're getting the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I'm sure somebody's talking about bringing the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon back at some point, somehow.
With as much as they've been pushing it, I feel like that show is getting rebooted soon. Like, I could be wrong, but hopefully in a more new and interesting way. The old D&D cartoon, but we know, like, Dragonlance show is coming. I think with the success of Critical Role, they're going to be looking at a lot of, like, how can we do some animated cartoons and stuff. So,
yep, I agree. I'm excited. I'm a huge Stranger Things fan, and I think it's definitely part of the whole tabletop community now, because it brought so many other people in. I think too, at that time, it's getting pretty popular, but then it brings in mainstream right back in, and it's just geek culture all through and through. So.
Yeah. This was just a fun article that I saw. I guess this should be under, like, discussion topics. But we were talking about it earlier, but, like, ChatGPT as your dungeon master. There was, this was just an interesting little article that it's like, hey, I'm a DM. I've got kids that are like 15 and 23 or something, and we wanted to try and play a game together, but let ChatGPT be the DM. And it feels like it kind of worked. In order to really understand it, he's like, here's the transcript of, like, what they wrote and what ChatGPT came out. But he said, and if you're unfamiliar with ChatGPT, which I doubt you are, it is the AI conversation that you can have, and it's blowing up the world right now. But they told, like, hey, you're no longer a friendly assistant. You're now a dungeon master for 5e D&D. Because it's online, I'm assuming it's familiar with the rules, because it kind of works. And so they say, like, hey, our players are this. We have a human paladin. He's level 2. He's got this, da-da-da-da-da. And then the guy's like, okay. And yeah, it's like, I don't know. It just asks really interesting thing. Like the adventure starts in Aloendor, a hub of trade and commerce nestled along the banks of the Silver River. And it's like, as you walk into the city, you hear rumors of hidden treasures deep within the treacherous wild thorn forests. Locals speak of blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, and then they ask, is there a tavern? Yes, there's a tavern called the Silver Flagon. And yeah, it's just straight up, I don't know, like they make rolls and they do all these interesting things and they tell them what they rolled. And
yeah, like real rolls. Like, yeah, you could be like,
I don't know.
It amazed me the things they were able to ask it and it was able to do. I mean, I think they said at some point it did start to break down a little bit, but it was just like, that's just the first steps. That's
and there was a guy on YouTube that turned ChatGPT into a old multi-user dungeon, or an old MUD, like the old text role-playing games that were on computers. And I think there was a documentary about them called Get Lamp, because you always had to type stuff like look, and it would be like, you see this, and you're like, walk forward, get lamp, oh, I have to type get lamp in order to like pick up the lamp. And he did a pretty good job of fine tuning it. And I think that was ChatGPT 3. And now we're at like 5. Like it's already building really, really fast. There could be a market for that. Like I'm literally thinking of people sitting around a table in the future and you have your Alexa at the table and everyone's talking and then they turn to Alexa and they're like, okay, like what do we see? And Alexa, the DM Alexa is like, oh, well, you do this and this and this. Okay, cool. Well, what do you guys want to do? And then you turn back, you tell Alexa. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. I believe that human DMs will never go away because I like DMing more than I like playing. So I would enjoy running a game, but this is kind of a fun, weird experiment. I don't know. So,
I mean, yeah. And I don't think we're too far away because you can do AI generated voices. You can do AI generated art. So you can do an AI generated dungeon master. You could easily have a full campaign with maps and different voices for the characters you meet. And once it's able to remember all that's come before it, I think that's the thing, is that it has to remember the things that have happened in each session so that it can always work and build on that. And once it can do that, once it can store all of that stuff and save it for the next time, well, yeah, you have an automated dungeon master just sitting there playing. And you as a group, because I know lots of people who have wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons but have struggled to get a dungeon master or convince one of the people in the group to be the dungeon master, because the groups I had always was in were the groups that wanted to be players. We were just hoping to get a dungeon master or hoping one of our friends would volunteer to play. So dungeon master was a hard to find commodity at certain times. I feel like maybe it's not that way now. I feel like there might be a lot of people that love to do Dungeon Master or are willing to do it. So maybe it's not as big a deal now, but just imagine that there are those groups that are like, well, we don't really want to be a Dungeon Master. We maybe not even know the rules very well, but we can all sit at a table and play this, and it knows the rules and it can tell us the rules and it can do all the things for us. And we can just have a great 3-hour night on Thursdays with, our named whatever GM that's running us through some crazy story that it's made up out of, whatever.
There was speaking of like DMs, I remember they said like there's a lack of DMs for 5e, like a shortage. But the flip side of that in these videos is there's an overabundance of DMs in the OSR. And a lot of these other games, like there's so many people that want to run games and they're all writing interesting stuff. And I think it's probably just because 5e is more popular and is more of an entrance into gaming, whereas OSR is like you usually been playing a lot of other stuff and now you're here, so you're probably more, not saying that there's just like DMs sitting around in the OSR being like, I wish I had players, and like these 5e players, I wish I had a DM. Oh, we should just put you together. That's not what's going to happen, but it's kind of interesting.
Well, and I wanted to go at this because there are a lot of articles, there's a lot of YouTube videos now out there, there's a lot of stuff said on Twitter and stuff about ChatGPT and the Dungeon Master angle of it and just what it did and what it could do and that thing. But there's a couple other angles that I haven't seen people really explore. And I thought when I saw this in our notes, I'm like, okay, I want Jordan to help me explore this. Imagine the reverse of what you said, though, too. Like you just said, I'd like to be a dungeon master, but maybe I can't get a group together to play what I want. What if you had a couple of different chat GPTs that were the players?
That would be
And you were like,
really,
hello, chat GPT players, you are here. What would you like to do?
you
And they're
know,
just all like,
to
do this.
test, like if I was writing something and I wanted to test a combat or something, that could be really interesting. Like if I wanted to test a scenario, I don't know.
Yeah. So that was one angle I was thinking of that I don't think gets explained or talked about as much. And then I was thinking, well, sometimes if you are going to an AI, a chat GPT in this case, or a robot or an android or whatever you would be the proxy for this, the idea would be is you weren't able to find somebody, a friend, a family member that would do it. So you're trying to find an alternative because you just haven't been able to find a group of friends, one dungeon master, and that's all coalesced into a schedule that works. And great, you have that. But if you don't, you start looking for what else can I do because I don't want to not play. The answer isn't not to play. So then you're like, okay, ChatGPT could be my dungeon master. So that's like the traditional role. The ChatGPT is your dungeon master. You have your friends and you play. Also, I could see like a solo version of this, like a one-on-one, right? Maybe I can't find a group of people to play with. I just want to try to play the game. It can be my dungeon master. It runs me through an adventure with my character, and it's fun, and it's a solo. But there was one other version of this that I thought I wanted to kind of get your idea on. It's the idea of what about a co-op version of Dungeons and Dragons so that you didn't need a chat GPT to be your dungeon master. You didn't need chat GPT to be a player, but is there a version of role playing? And some people have tried this, and I've seen it in a few different styles, that the group comes together and can play a role playing game, but there is no dungeon master. We're all players.
Yes, The Quiet Year, Alice is Missing.
Ironsworn.
Those two are the ones that pop into my head right away. But you still have to have somebody who understands the rules. But there's not a DM because you are a character and everybody's reacting to everybody else. So,
and I always wondered about it because, like, in tabletop gaming is synonymous to like video gaming. So you have single player, huge storyline arc games. You have multiplayer games. But you also have co-op games. So you really have this idea that's like the third kind of pillar of different types of way to play games. Solo, PvP, or co-op PvE. You know, those are the three. So I always wondered if tabletop could have all three. We've seen PvP style tabletop. I've seen some, people run some tournaments and, whether it's dashing through towers to see who can get the furthest, whether it's actual arena tournaments. We've seen Critical Role do that.
I wouldn't call that PvP if you're trying to, because they have tournament module things, and DCC does this all the time, where it's like, we're going to play through, and then you add up points, and it's whoever got the most points wins. That's competitive, but that's not player versus player. That's not like me attacking somebody. So
right, but there have been tournaments. I mean, Grant did one where the Daisy did one where it was two groups of players fighting against each other in an arena.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they did it at Gen Con, and then to see whose group was the best.
I think Critical Role did something like that too. They wanted to see how well their like how well Vox Machina versus the Mighty Nine would happen. But yeah.
So something like, it's not as common. It's definitely not something that the TTRPG community gets into a lot of, PvP, because really I think competitive nature doesn't lend well to storytelling nature as much. So I think that's why it doesn't come together as much. But it just made me think about, with ChatGPT being a proxy for different pieces of this, could you just have the co-op version of this? Could you just have... it could run a game between two groups that come together, and it could be the thing that just says what's happening and tells us. Then the two groups get to fight each other. So you could even do it that way. I think would be fun too.
I think what we really need to do is get 5 chat GPTs and make one the dungeon master and 4 the players, and have them just play a game and watch, see what happens. Like
there is people who do that where they have you seen I watched this in gaming where they set up an AI campaign in a city building game like Civ or whatever, and then they speed through it to see which AI wins, and then they keep doing it over and over with the different, and they're fascinated by what those different AIs have chosen to do or how they reacted to the other AIs. And there's a whole group of community behind, watching AI fight AI.
Well, we had a brief. I realized I could do polls, and I think it was somebody in chat said, "Hey, a quick poll. Does anybody think ChatGPT is good for like D&D?" And 60% said good, and 40% said bad. I don't know, but that probably is more of a extrapolation on how you feel about AI in general in the arts, because it's got Planescape is coming.
I wanted to mention these next 3 items. I was watching. There's a video out on D&D Beyond, and Chris Perkins is in it. A bunch of people are in it, and Tristan, and some of the people from Wizards of the Coast that are doing stuff, and then some of the people that are just kind of affiliated with them around a lot of the online stuff. So in it, they had this cool, they were showing a lot of art of the 4 books that are coming out this year. So they were talking about little tidbits, and they were trying to get little pieces of information out of Chris about the books that are coming out this year. And they showed this artwork for Planescape. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting about it is that they said they really wanted to tackle the look of Planescape again and really bring it into a modern age. And this was kind of like a picture of it. And then I saw the Modron all the way on the right. So I thought, I'm going to put this in because you have a Modron game going on. So why not? It has Modron, and I thought it was kind of cool. I'm guessing maybe you can play a Modron in this new book coming out, maybe is the way I'm thinking about it. Maybe a Modron that's been sentient, or what happens when a Modron is no longer following.
Yeah, they call them rogue Modrons when they break away from like the actual. And a rogue Modron is just a Modron that won't take orders. And so if you don't take orders, then you've gone rogue, and the other Modrons try to kill you because then your essence will go back to Modronville, and a new Modron will be made. But the rogue Modrons don't want to die, so they run away. So there are rogue Modrons. In the original Planescape for 2E, there was a race rule where you could play a Modron. And so I would not be surprised at all if they put it into this thing.
Bring it in. That'd be so good. And then, so also in that, he said, Chris Perkins said sigil, as if GIF. So he must be a GIF, not GIF guy, because he said sigil. And then he confirmed that if you like donuts, then you like sigil, because sigil's a donut.
It is. It's shaped like a donut, but we all know it's a torus. There's no mathematical donut. There is a mathematical torus. So
we had a note about this earlier, which made me laugh a lot.
Yeah, we were arguing about, because, in our notes, he's like, it's confirmed that it's a donut. And I'm like, no, it's a torus. And you're like, Chris said it so. And I'm like, well, Chris is wrong, which then hurt me to write because Chris is never wrong. He's so cool. But no, it's interesting because when they created Pathfinder, they were talking about like what would be the central hub of like the upper and lower planes. And from a math perspective, it's just interesting because if they collide in on itself, it would do this. And that's where like sigil is just this really interesting finite space in infinite space. And I always thought it's really cool how they came up with it.
Yeah. And I think I saw the titles of the books in that video. So I think that one was Planescape is like the Adventures in the Multiverse, I think is the tagline they're going with that. Mm-hmm. They also talked about the Deck of Many Things book, and Chris in that video confirmed that the Deck of Many Things is not only 22 cards anymore, which is what everybody would have thought of as the Deck of Many Things. There are many more cards now, and they're adding cards, and it's going to be a bigger deck. And it sounded like he said in that it's a product. I think you get a Deck of Many Things physical product with Deck of Many Things book.
Yeah, I would argue. I think you do, unless they're selling it separately. But they did say they are making a physical deck that you can get.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's part of it. Maybe it's bundled together. I don't know.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So Deck of Many Things, and they were really exploring everything around that. And the artwork looks fantastic in that, because I think the different artwork that you can have on the deck and then how it affects things is pretty cool. He talked about Vengar and them getting to use
Venger,
Venger back. And he said they're going at the angle that he's a red wizard, and I don't know if that had ever been said.
No,
that's where they're.
He's a Cambion. He's like a half devil, half thing. Like he's a sorcerer. Yeah. He's like an evil guy, but like he's straight up a Cambion. So I thought that was weird that they're making him a red wizard, but who knows?
Yeah. So there's some angle going on with that, and then they talked a tiny bit about the Phandelver book, and it sounds like in the box set or the way they're making it is they're putting the original Phandelver also into this, so you can have that piece of it somehow, or at least
the starter set will just be included in.
You don't have to go play the first one to play this one.
Oh, okay.
And then the one thing he said in there that I thought was super interesting is I think the name of it was Phandelver, and I think it's something like the Broken Obelisk or the Fractured Obelisk or something, and it heavily is going to get into the obelisk story for sure. Yeah. So, and I know it's a big thing for the Jordan YouTube channel
for the conspiracy theorists like myself. No, that is really big, and it's pretty interesting that, like, we've talked about it on the show before, where they have things planned out like 5-6 years in advance. And so dropping these obelisks, they knew that they were going to build up to this. And it's just kind of fun that the fans caught it and that we're like, what's going on with these? And now it's all coming together, and Vecna's going to be the big bad of the thing, which it feels like a Marvel Cinematic Universe in that we got little movies about character, about different villains, and now it's all kind of coming together. And a lot of people complain about this iteration of the realms. And this is kind of a leak into, or a spoiler into my obelisk video that I haven't released yet. But they're talking a lot about the multiverse. And so you have Out of the Abyss. And it's like, that's a huge thing that happened. What's the timeline for that? And Wizards is always like, we don't really know. And then you think about like what happened down in Chult and the Death Curse. It's like, well, was the Death Curse happening the same time as Out of the Abyss? And they're like, we don't want to talk about it. I think what we're going to see is that there are parallel worlds of the Forgotten Realms, and Out of the Abyss happened in one, and Tomb of Annihilation happened in another, but none of them ever like crossed like that. And this is how they're going to make products going forward, where it will be like, here is this sliver of the realms. And that could be good or bad for fans. I think it's very difficult to control a living world of the Forgotten Realms, which they were trying to do back in the day, which is a cool idea, but really frustrating and hard to kind of control and to keep everybody on the same page. It's a lot easier to be like, here's a random adventure that happened in Realm 616 as opposed to Realms 528 or something. So with this multiverse, like jumping between things, I think Planescape is going to really define that. And Vecna will be the person that bridges those planar barriers of parallel realms kind of thing. So
for those of you that don't know, 616 is an area code of Michigan, one of them.
Oh, really? There you go.
Oh, and there was one more thing in there, tidbit-wise or canon now, that I thought you would be interested in. Do you know why Big B's spell, Big B's hand, why the hand is so large?
Because it's got to grab things? I don't know. It was a spell he made.
And the next book is about Big B presents giants.
Oh, yeah, Big B's giants. Yeah.
He could high five giants.
That's confirmed by Chris Perkins.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why he made that spell, was simply to high five giants. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris. That's great. That's cool. That's interesting. Have you used the Deck of Many Things in a game, or have you done anything with it?
No, it's never popped up in my games.
I was curious because for some reason I didn't know that it was 22 cards, and when I did it, he had like a full 52 card deck, and then we looked up the card that I pulled with that. But I'm wondering if they just extrapolate the cards, so it's like there are 3 versions of this card, and that's how they make a 22 card deck into a 52 card deck.
There's something about a 13 card deck, and somebody in that video mentions a 13 card and a 22 card. So I wondered if there were different versions of the deck too that had those numbers. It was like now confirmed.
Maybe if you take out some of the bad cards so that you don't like insta die or something, but or maybe they're talking about the Taraka deck, which is the fortune telling one from Curse of Strahd, which is a different set of cards. But
is that 13? Maybe
I don't know. That's what I was wondering. I don't know off the top of my head, but expanding the deck of many things into a larger one, and with 5e design being we don't want to punish the player or hurt the player, I wonder how they will handle the really bad things that are part of the deck of many things. They're still in 5e. Like if you read the 5e ones, like you can lose levels, you can lose all your magic items. The Angel of Death can appear and you have to fight it one-on-one. And if your players help you, you insta die, you know. Those things are still there, but they're very anti-5e design in a way. Even though I like those things, so I don't know. But it's very, like, it's this balance of, like, how do we make it fun for the players, but also be authentic to the original design of the deck of many things. So expanding upon that, I'm like, are you expanding it so that the really bad things have a much smaller chance of happening, you know? That might be actually, now that I think about it, that might be the design. Is like, if we just make it so that there's a 1 in 52 chance, it's a little easier, a much easier pill to swallow than a 1 in 22 chance of, insta dying. So Insta death. Yes. Chat reminded me that Acquisitions Incorporated funded and is moving forward. So they got my money. They took my pledge. That was cool. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know. Like, I really like Hulkins.
I love
I really like Mike. I like those characters. I think Jim Dark Magic is like one of my favorite characters that I've seen play in tabletop, and I don't know. It's kind of character I would want to play, just like a really eccentric kind of like starstruck magic user. I think it's awesome. And it's been fun to see the journey of that. I'm really curious of all the people, and I did finally catch the latest Acquisitions Incorporated, and it was very, very good. And I had not watched a lot of games with I forget her name, but her handle is that bronze girl. But she plays Omen's, is it daughter or niece? Daughter. She plays Omen's daughter so well. Like she has embodied that character where she's just like, oh, like the finances is not right, and she's like constantly focused on business, and was just a joy to watch. It was very funny. So
their corporate version of D&D is so good. It's like funny. The Office to me, and that's like one of my beloved sit down watch sitcoms to ever go back to is The Office, and I think that's why I love hacking so much, because it's like Office and D&D. Yeah,
for sure. Oh, thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Sky. Do you think the Raven Queen will play a part in the Vecna Obelisk adventure? I don't know if the Raven Queen will come back. She's definitely popular.
A book on Raven Queen.
She is the most popular thing to come out of 4E, I think, and I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Or will they make it like Orcus versus Vecna? Because I know those two are fighting about who should be like the god of necromancy and stuff. So,
well, Chris said in that video too, and I had never heard this before, that Vecna is the god of secrets.
In 4E, he was they elevated him to a deity in 4E, and actually in second edition, that was the whole. There were watch my Vecna video, but there were 3 adventures. And the first one is Vecna in Oerth in Greyhawk. And then he gets banished at the end of that to go to Ravenloft. And he's in a demi-plane of the Domains of Dread, and he can't get out. And then when he finally is able to get out of that demi-plane, he ascends to godhood, and that is how he gets out of that demi-plane. And he winds up in Sigil. And gods cannot be in Sigil, so Sigil is like destroying itself, and like it's one of those things like the impossible has happened. reality is tearing itself apart, and so the adventurers need to go in and make sure Vecna leaves. But when he and I forget exactly how that ends, but when he does leave Sigil, I think he's still a god and he ascended up. But yeah, in 4th edition they made him a god because it was just kind of like fun, like Vecna, the god of secrets. But he isn't a deity in 5e, so I don't know. Maybe they'll make him a deity. So, but I think it could be fun if they bring it into 5e. Like he was the god of secrets and he died, or maybe he has kept himself a secret until now when he needs to come back. So, definitely going to tie him into the Book of Vile Darkness because the stat block for him, the picture has the Book of Vile Darkness like in his chest. So, lots of crazy.
I think he is probably the best, or they can make him into the best quintessential D&D villain, because the artwork, the stuff that's out there, the storylines they could tell, that to me is even better than like Tiamat as being the big bad, or some of the other ones that that you could consider being the big bad. I think Vecna's the perfect one. I think that's the one you just go with and run with as the big. When people say who's evil in Dungeons and Dragons, you want people who've never played to say Vecna. Like they don't know anything else, but they know Vecna's the bad guy of Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, and I think it's kind of like Tiamat is just big and a monster and will eat you, but it's probably the same reason that people like Strahd in Curse of Strahd. Like he's a very like focused, evil, calculated character, and I think Vecna feels the same way. But that's just from reading past adventures and lore, like we don't have a lot of stuff on Vecna in all honesty. So
it sounds like we're going to start getting more though. So
I think we will.
Really cool.
Yep.
So I checked for some
news. He was a god in
just
3. Okay. Apparently he was god in 3rd edition. Sorry.
Oh, all right.
All right. Go ahead.
The finishing, I did go and see if there was anything from Paizo. I didn't see anything new that we didn't talk about last week. So it seemed pretty much what we had already said, so didn't see anything there. But I did jump over to Modiphius, and I did see that they are partnering with another company, and they're doing a Blood and Doom Kickstarter tabletop role-playing game, basically a dark fantasy tabletop role-playing game. This is a D10 dice pool, so I thought that was interesting, and you might go over and check it out. It's on Kickstarter right now, but you can also get to it from the Modiphius site just to see if you want to see any information about it. Artwork drew me in. Like I saw the picture of the artwork and I'm like, okay, let me read a little bit more into this and see what's going on. And I thought it looked pretty cool. Have you heard of any D10 dice pool systems out there? What's your thought on the
White
D10?
Wolf is the only one that really comes to mind off the top of my head, but but no, that's usually like you have a success on a 10 or a 9 or something if you're really skilled in it. And then you could either be, I'm more skilled, so I get more dice, or I'm more skilled in that I succeed on a 7, 8, or 9 as opposed to just a 9 or 10, So I don't know. That could be. I like the idea of them. So
some highlight the core rules. Not that I've read them, but you guys can go out there and look at it. They have things like they're called blood points and doom points. So that to me are like some games call them bennies, or some games call them fate points. I think things like that. The system, you don't track hit points, you track wounds, injuries, and madness and trauma instead. That sounds interesting.
Wounds and madness and stuff. That feels like a White Wolf kind of thing. Well, no, like you don't have hit points. A lot of these games like that, you don't use hit points. So
yeah. No set initiative order. Not sure how that'll work, but okay, that sounds interesting. So those were just some other things. And then they say, hey, if you're a 5e player, you'll be a fan of this too. But that would be anything that I think a Kickstarter would say. Yeah. So interesting. I thought it looked cool. I think the artwork is very Conan-like, very what is it called? Swords and sandals, or sorcery, and there's always that term for the Conan style of fantasy versus Forgotten Realms style of fantasy, or a high fantasy.
Oh, so not sword and sorcery. That would be Forgotten Realms
kind of fantasy. Yeah.
I wanted to say that from the page here, it says that their creative team includes writers from RuneQuest, Dune Adventures in Imperium, Star Trek Adventures, Conan Adventures in the Age Undreamed of, the Hero System, and the One Ring. So some cool people seem to be working on it.
a lot of stuff.
Although they didn't name them, they just kind of said that we had some people. So who knows?
And those are a lot of people those are the games that a lot of Modiphius is a part of. A lot of those games that were mentioned there too. So it kind of does make a little bit sense. But while I was there, that was the only real news I saw. But it did generate a show discussion, which was a little bit into. I saw this when I was on Modiphius' site. Is they showed a picture of Star Trek Lower Decks, which I think we are both a fan of and have said on the show before. Love Star Trek, love the humor of what Lower Decks is and what it's trying to do. And with its couple of seasons, I think they're into season 3 at this point. They may even be further.
Season 4, I think. Yeah, it's coming up.
You had mentioned that people are thinking about doing a Star Trek game. They want you to run one. You're excited to maybe run one. It may all happen. It could happen. My question then, where am I leading this to, is would you do a Lower Decks style adventure for them? Or are you going to do a more traditional, I don't know, the next
like
generation
Captain
story?
So are you going to be like the people that have to go scrub the turbo lifts, or are you going to be the captain and the chief medical officer? I was leaning towards that because it feels more like you want to be in control of the ship, but it's really about the story you want to tell. And I don't know the story yet, but I love Lower Decks and I love the tongue-in-cheek. Like if you're a Star Trek fan, it's really all references. So I don't know if it translates to people who are not Star Trek fans as well. But as a Star Trek fan, like I think the show is hilarious. And I think I've even written that I was like, when I was watching it, I wrote on Twitter that I'm like, hey, I really want to run a Lower Decks game. Like, I think that would be fun. So the fact that they're coming out with this Lurkers game, 100%, I think I would run something like this. I think it would be a lot of fun. And did you read what Lurkers is?
A little bit. Yeah, like he had written an adventure, I thought.
Yeah, so it was a story pitched for a 2006 Star Trek anthology or something. But the idea is that there was a leaking subspace relay that was then projecting all of the transmissions from the Federation to a planet, and the planet picked him up. And so now you have this planet that has grown with Star Trek in their lives, their whole lives. And so when they're actually discovered, it's like, oh my gosh, you're Captain Janeway, you're this, like, that's so cool. And you have a planet of Star Trek fans, a planet of Trekkies. And that's the joke. And so they were saying, like, this makes for a perfect Lower Decks, like, game, basically. And we're going to utilize this because you can throw in all those references. For my players, I think they would love it. Like, I think they would find it so funny, and it would, like, throwing in references here and there. So I love this idea, and I'm very excited for this.
And this hits so far home because I just watched Galaxy Quest again 2 days on Netflix and enjoyed every single minute of that movie once again, and just thought it's such a great concept. Just the story concept. We intercepted your historical document, your show on history. We were so impressed that we decided to shape our culture around it. Yeah, the history of your culture. And then it's the actor standing there going, "Wait, what? What do you mean historical culture? You based everything? We built this ship on trying to figure out how you guys did it." Everything about that is so good, and I was hoping that's the type of game you run for your players because it's just so fun. And that was, I guess I was wondering, what tone were you thinking about going with 2? Did you want it to be a funny tone? Did you want it to be more of a serious tone, like a serious episode? Or did you want more of a comedic angle to it?
And I don't know, like, I should try and run a serious game. I think Invisible Sun was going to be like my dip into being like a super serial kind of, but I always just want to laugh and have fun with my players. Like, I'm very much let's just beer and pretzels and just have a good time. As much as I have streamed games in the past, this probably won't come as a surprise, but I like playing at my table with my friends and not not making it a performance, because it is just like fun to sit down and play and not stress out about like, is this interesting? How many viewers do we have? What's chat saying? Like, we're just, and if we get on a tangent talking about how cute my dog is, like, that's fine, you know? It's very different streaming a game. And when I'm not thinking about streaming it, I'm always like, well, I just want to have fun and laugh with my players. And so a serious game never really pops into my mind. But I should try one sometime. Be super serial. I don't know.
I should try it.
I should try being super serial one time. Maybe I'll finally play that Invisible Sun game. Probably won't. Really want to.
That all kind of came together, and I just thought these were all things that I know Jordan was into. I'm super interested for when this game happens and hearing all about it. And I think Lurkers was cool.
It's a game. I mean, it's part of Star Trek Adventures. It's going to be like a module you can buy to like run a lower decks game, and I think that'll be really fun when it comes out. So, wait, is this out? Grab a copy of Lurk. Oh, it is. The USS Cerritos Lurkers. You can buy it for $5. I didn't even realize this. I'm getting it right now. 100%. Check out. Okay, well, we'll worry about that later. I'll put links down below. I've been reading the Black Sword hack, which is a hack of the Black Hack, which is an RPG that's very, very good.
And you have a hack of the hack?
I have a hack of the hack of the hack. And I wanted to talk about Doom Dice, because I thought it was kind of an interesting idea to put into really any D20 RPG. And when something bad or weird happens, or if you go down to 0 hit points, or if an omen, like anytime that there's just like, I don't know, maybe you could even say when you roll a natural 1, you would roll your Doom Dice. And how Doom Dice work is it's kind of like we've talked about in the past, or maybe I talked about this with Lex. I forget, but ammunition. So it's like I have a D10 arrows, and after every fight, you would roll your D10 arrows, and if it's ever a 1 or a 2, it goes down to a D8. And then the next time you would roll, and it's like, okay, I rolled a 6 on my D8. All right, you still have a D8 of arrows. But the idea is that every time you're using arrows, you would roll it, and on a 1 or a 2, it goes down a die step. This is the same thing, only it's Doom. So every time a Doom thing happens, and the game actually has a lot of ways for you to utilize Doom. Like I could take on Doom to get advantage on this roll, but then I have to roll on the Doom die, and if it's a 1 or a 2, my Doom die goes from a D8 to a D6, and that's worse for me. And if I ever go to a D4 and I roll on the Doom die and it's a 1 or a 2 and I go to 0, you are considered doomed. And it has all these negative implications for you until you can get undoomed. But I kind of liked that risk and reward, and I'm surprised that I haven't seen that in more RPGs. And I read a lot of RPGs, and it's usually from the mindset of how could I incorporate what I liked into a bigger game? And this made me think of like the Shadowfell. Like if you wanted the Shadowfell to feel really, really oppressive, I would have to come up with what doomed meant in the Shadowfell. But I like the idea of there's this weight hanging over you, and whenever certain things happen, you have to roll on your Doom die, and it goes from like a D8 to a D6 to a D4 to you're doomed. So that was, I don't know, I just wanted, like, what do you think about that?
I like that, but let me tell you my head version, when you said the words Doom die, this is what popped up into my head. What if, as a dungeon master, at the start of each session, you put out in front of you 3 giant black dice? They are the Doom dice, right? Yeah. 3 of them. And during the game, at any point where you want to introduce more tension, you think things need to be ratcheted as a dungeon master. Think of a GM intrusion for Cypher players and in the Monte Cook system. Anytime that you think, it's going a little too easy for the players, you can reach out in front and grab your Doom die, and as the person's about to do whatever they're going to do, they say, I want to do this thing or this thing, and you're like, okay, but you're going to roll with the Doom die when you do it. And then it has rules, like if it has, like you said, a 1 or a 2 means this thing happens, or what if it rolls double numbers, so 11s or, whatever, it could be this thing, or maybe it's evens and odds do something like, and I only get 3 of them, but the idea is to generate tension with the party because they see the Doom dice in the front. They're wondering when you're going to use it. They're hoping you don't choose your turn when you decide, oh no, I got to use a doom die to make my attack. Damn it.
And they know that you have 3. That's the other cool thing.
Yeah. And they know how many you get. They know, but they don't know when you'll use them. And it has a lot of different, maybe it's just like a big set of tables that you've created.
Yeah.
And it could be just all kinds of stuff that doesn't relate to rolling high to hit. It just means if you roll a 7 on the doom die while you're trying to do this thing, here's some things that are going to happen.
Yeah, so if I attack, so if I attack and I roll the doom die, then it's like I could still hit, I could still do all my regular damage, but the fact that I rolled a 12 on that, then we look at the table and I'm like, oh, a 12 means that, I don't know, something happened, something bad. So, that's kind of a cool idea too, actually. It's like that's like a reverse inspiration. Like instead of giving inspiration out for something good, the DM has like, oh, I have this malicious thing to give out, which actually reminds me a little bit of the Mazes RPG that we played. We played Mazes at Gen Con. The DM actually has some of these dark things that they can, whether depending on the light. I don't know. That was a weird game, but I'm not saying it in a negative way, but I need to research it more before I comment further, I guess. So.
Well, I always liked how Monty Cook explained it because when he was talking about GM intrusions, there's times where there's just a span of really good luck for players and things are going just a little bit too easy for them. It's going a little too well, and you want to entice them to embrace something going wrong. So in that game, you can say, do you want a GM intrusion? And if you take it, you get an experience point, which will help you level up. But it's enticing you to embrace something going wrong. And I like that idea, but I also like the idea of you controlling a little bit of that tension as a dungeon master with your party and using it as like you might go to pick it up and you're like, oh, you want to attack that creature? And then you're like, okay, and then you take it reaching for the doom dice. And you could just play so many fun. That's where my head went when you said doom dice. I'm like, oh my God. But I do like what you were talking about. A way to go from a higher dice down to a lower dice down to a lower dice to the epic doom if you get too far down that track.
And so that's cool. I don't know, it's kind of like it's a weird because I don't want another resource to track when I'm playing RPGs, but this doesn't necessarily feel like that. I just know like, oh yeah, my doom is at a D8 and they're like, okay, cool. And so you kind of just, I don't know, I like that. They also use the example of what if you do something and somebody owes you like a favor or they're indebted to you in some way. And so you go to them and you're like, hey, I need you to do this for me. And they're like, okay. And maybe that debt is a D6. Well, you keep, he'll keep doing stuff for you until you roll a 1 or a 2 and then it goes to a D4 and then it goes down so that, we don't really know when the debt's going to be paid off and it's still luck of the dice, but I don't know. It's just really interesting. It's kind of fun. So.
I do like that. Those are both good. I think those are both cool ways to use something like that. Doom dice sound
maybe
cool.
Doom dice will be in our cliff game that we're going to write at some
point. Doom dice. Sure. The rope you're on has frayed and snapped.
Yeah. But it's kind of like GM intrusions now that you say that. I think that's a good way to put it too. Or your idea is like kind of like that. So
yeah.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about? I mean, we got 2 minutes. What do you want to talk about?
We didn't play our game, so we're hoping maybe we'll.
I guess I played Modron March, but
yeah. But guess what I did? While I was sitting here doing my research for the show this morning, I went over to the Nexus site where Pathfinder 2e is hosted for its character. It's in alpha.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize I could hit the alpha button, and it would let me create characters. I don't know if this is true for everybody because it said closed alpha. I assumed you had to be invited to a closed alpha.
Oh.
I created a character this morning, a level 1 wizard, using Pathfinder 2e's online character generator, and it's slick. It's super cool in its alpha stage. I'm super excited because that was the cog that I needed to be completed to run my Pathfinder 2e game. And I may just now be able to do it because now you can create characters in Pathfinder 2e, I think. I mean, I created one this morning.
It might not have all of the extensive books, but if you have the base book there, that's where you want to start. So yeah, that sounds awesome.
It had a lot of stuff in there. I think it had more than what was in the base book. But yeah, I think I haven't explored it completely yet, and I just played around a tiny bit with going through. I like how it sets out your choices. I like how the buttons interact with things. I like how the artwork and the UI style is. It's a darker style, so it's not bright white in your face, which I love. So it's like a night version of a web browser. Maybe you can go there to their site and it works for you too. I don't know if it's just some people can do it and some can't. I don't know if it, because they say closed alpha doesn't mean open to me, but I was able to create a character, and I'm going to go and create a bunch more characters just to play around with it. So that was my big news of the day, and think, oh, I get to create some Pathfinder 2e characters. It's gonna be
That's
great.
really cool. I mean, we've been talking about you got to do that Pathfinder game. Been talking about it for so long.
I'm ready now. I'm ready.
Yeah, we did Great Mode Run March, which was fun. The big reveal is that the guy that they've been the guy that instigated the Great Mode Run March is actually Orcus, and so now it's like, oh, and so I'm gonna have him level up soon, and I'm trying to decide if I want him to get. I don't think I'm gonna get him to 20 because they're gonna be level 15. But that's that's 5 levels to get him to 20 before the Orcus fight. Like that just feels like years of play. So I think we might, or they're 14 right now. So, and I'm going to level them up to 15 soon. So I think we're going to do like maybe an Orcus fight at like level 16. I'm not sure, but I don't know when it's too difficult to fight Orcus. Or what level do you have to be? But then LB made me sad because she's like, yeah, we're fighting Orcus in our other game. I'm like, dang it. Apparently, Indoor Adventure ran him through something, and Orcus was the big bad in that one. And I'm like, oh, well, you're going to fight him twice.
This is a better Orcus.
Yeah, I was like, this one's got like flames on the side, so he's faster. It's cool.
Yeah, it's better. Makes him good.
But yeah, we're plugging along with that game, having a lot of fun. So it's interesting. We get online to play, and we always just want to like chat and catch up with each other. And then it's like, oh yeah, I guess we should play the game. Like I get the sensation that like it's really just like we should just have a night to chat. I'm like, yeah, cool. Well, I'm gonna read that Lurkers game that I just bought, so I'm very excited for that.
I'm always trying to find stuff I know you'd like.
Thank you. Very exciting. Other things, I've been reading DCC, and I've got the Venture Maidens book that came in the mail, and I need to read through this. Have not yet, but that took a long time to come out, but I'm very proud of Celeste for writing such a cool world. I like it a lot. I think that's our show. Anything else?
We made it.
We made it.
Made it to the end.
We did it.
That was enough, I think, wasn't it?
We did it. So good. Thank you guys for watching and hanging out with us this fine Saturday morning. We will be back next week, correct? You're here? I'm here? No.
I might be camping next week.
Okay. All right. I'll figure it out. Otherwise, I'll just hang out with you. I don't know. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in, next week, if not later. But take care, everybody. Thank you.